I really feel bad for North Carolina. I really do. I've lived there twice. I went to school there. Didn't graduate, but I went to NC State. I lived in North Carolina when, at a time when there were huge billboards outside of Raleigh on the way to Wilson and Rocky Mount. Big billboards that said, "This is Klan country!" And they'd have one of these cowardly rat bastard Klansmen on back of a horse with the horse reared up and the hood flapping around. And so, I lived there during some pretty weird times. By the same token, I watched North Carolina try to sort of find its soul. And not completely, but sort of, I said. And then, and once it did that, it became, the research triangle was established, Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, where an awful lot of science was conducted. University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, one of the best schools in the country, yada, 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 yada. But that was then, this is now, and North Carolina is in the hands of these psychopathic Republicans, and it's a shame to watch. It really is. North Carolina, geographically or topographically, is such a beautiful state. It really is. From the mountains to the seashore, it's really beautiful. But it's a shame what has happened politically in that state. So back to this lowering taxes. Now again, the state's corporate tax rate has been dropped to 3%, and it's estimated by the time this tax rate comes into effect on the corporations, which will be 2016. Well, that's next year. The state will have $350 million less in revenue. I said close to $500 million. Well, when you get up around $350 million, who's keeping track, right? But that'll be less money to spend on public services like education and health care and roads and bridges and infrastructure. They don't care. Now, how will North Carolina pay for these new tax cuts that primarily benefit the rich? Fair question. By raising taxes on the poor, of course. What would you expect? The roughly $400 million, $350 million in income tax cuts, including the corporate, will be offset by increasing the sales tax on services that are primarily used by people who are not in the 1%. For example, on March 1st coming, new sales tax rates of 6.75% will go into effect across North Carolina. Almost 7% sales tax. And will largely apply to things like car repairs, as well as the repair of appliances, right? Now, rich people don't repair their cars, the appliances, they just throw them away. And the conservative-leaning Raleigh News and Observer newspaper noted that the wealthy can afford new cars and warranties for appliances, so this tax will fall disproportionately on the poor. That's from the Raleigh News and Observer, which is not quite a teabag organ, so to speak, but it is a conservative newspaper. And whoever authored the op-ed in the Raleigh News and Observer also noted that North Carolina Republicans chose not to increase taxes on other services the rich use, like accountants, lawyers, architects, interior designers. No sales tax increase if you use that. But if you go get your goddamn car fixed, yeah. If you try to get your toaster working again, yeah, you're going to pay that increased income tax rate. As kind of a footnote to all this class war in North Carolina has been raging for about 5 years when Republicans took over control of the state legislature for the first time since Reconstruction. Reconstruction is what happened after the Civil War, for those of you who don't know. They call it Reconstruction here in the South. What it meant was trying to enslave black people again, only this time instead of using slavery, let's use poll taxes and Jim Crow laws. Okay? That's what they mean by Reconstruction. Um, and then in 2012, this right-wing freak, Pat McCrory, was elected governor. And therefore, North Carolina became another experimental lab for right-wing policymakers to force through all sorts of extreme policies. Look what happened in Kansas. I'm inclined to say look what happened in Georgia, but so far we haven't hit that low point so far. But this happens so often in the states here in the South because most of us here in the South are dumber than mud. We don't know what it's like to work in a union shop. We just, we're very religious. We like our Bibles and guns. And as far as the Negroes are concerned, well, I've got a couple black friends. Hell, this guy that works on my car. You know what I mean. Now, in addition to cutting taxes for the rich and raising them on the poor, the Republicans that run the state have demolished public education, disenfranchised Democratic-leaning voters, that law is currently on trial, attacked women's reproductive rights, that means privacy, that law was struck down by the U.S. Supreme Court, by the way, criminalized the disclosure of the chemicals used in fracking fluid. If you tell what they're using, your ass going to jail, boy. See? And passed numerous other pieces of right-wing legislation. Now, the North Carolina Republican Party's extremism was even too much for one former Republican who cited the party's extreme rightward shift as the reason for his switch to the Democratic Party. I don't know who that was because this article doesn't say who it is, but it's kind of sad, kind of heartbreaking to me. Just like the refusal of so many state governors to accept expanded Medicaid so that people in their state who are desperately in need of medical care would get it. And, being poor and being sick, what are your options? Oh, that's right, Obamacare. It's a shame.